Welcome to Shop Talk Live, episode number 280. This episode is me and Vic talking about how to be a good community member in the woodworking Instagram world, living life without a table saw, and setting up a bandsaw and how much room you need to give yourself around it, and this new generation of combination jointer planers and benchtop jointers especially, if they can do the type of work that we need them to do. Interesting conversation. Vic and I always have fun. Make sure you stick around to the very end on this one for a surprise. But before we get going, I want to let you know about our new video workshop, making an octagon with hand tools, featuring Michael Cullen. It sounds kind of silly, but it is a hand tool exercise that will test any woodworker to their max. And one of those projects that if anywhere along the way you get a measurement wrong, it's going to sneak up and bite you at some point further down the road. It's a testament to Michael's patience and skill. And I am not the type of person to mill lumber with hand planes, but this is something that I'm going to do at some point just to see if I can do it. So check it out on the website. If you're an unlimited member, every episode is available to you right now. I'll have a link down below. And that does it. Let's get started with the episode. Here we go. Vic, you taught me a lesson like 10 seconds ago. A minute ago.
Oh.
So
okay.
we being Fine Woodworking and you,
yes,
I guess, posted the same video on Instagram.
Yes.
And it was a clip from the clamp video that we did. And you're like so much more patient with commenters than I am.
Uh-huh.
And we've been getting some spicy comments, we'll say.
That's a
one
good
of them,
way to put it.
one of them I didn't see because I already had the person blocked. But you had pointed it out, and now they're blocked from Fine Woodworking as well. And then they spiced up your feed and got blocked from there as well.
Yeah, I don't understand it. I can only assume that it's like a troll because I really have a hard time believing that someone could be that much of a dink. Can you say dink? Is that okay?
Yeah, dink's good. Dink, no. You know what I should do? I should censor that so that it sounds like you said something really bad.
Right. Right.
Yeah. But
I don't know. I can't imagine responding to anybody that way. And then and if I genuinely don't like the person, I just wouldn't follow them.
Well, there's that, there's that, but then there's also a notion of if you genuinely don't like a post, just keep scrolling, right?
Right. Yeah. You don't have to stop and then show exactly how ignorant you are.
Oh, but you, Vic, handled this one very, very well. And this is not a spicy one, right?
Right.
But this is a comment or a type of comment that I feel like you and I have been wanting to talk about for a little while. Mm-hmm. And somebody asked, rightfully so, or kind of, right? Could you have just hung the clamp up? Or for those who didn't watch, I hang a pipe on the wall. I go to hang the clamp on it. The clamp slips off. And then we do a little bit about how I wish I had hockey tape, but I'm American, so we don't have hockey tape around here, blah, blah, blah. Cut to Vic throwing me a roll of hockey tape because he's Canadian, and this is a joke we like to play, right? And then I wrap the pipe with hockey tape and the clamp stays in place, right? So somebody asks, couldn't you just have hung the clamp up with the screw side up? That way the head holds it from slipping. And you said, sure, you could. Sorry. And then somebody else said, closing the jaws is a better solution and no tape needed. I replied like a smart ass, not as funny though.
And to be fair, it would not have been as funny.
No, that's not as funny. And I can't get my friend Vic in the video.
Right.
And then you replied like so maturely, better? How about a different way to do it? And to me, that was the best way of replying to that type of comment. I still argue that those comments aren't bringing much to the table. But if you are going to come to the table with an idea, it's not like a better or worse or this or that necessarily. And I love the way that you handled that, just to say, is it better? Because honestly, if you ask me, it's not better. I don't hang my clamps up that way. I hang my clamps from that jaw, right?
Right, absolutely. And that works, and that's better for you.
And so, this is the shop. That's okay. And this is the shop that primarily has like me working in it among other people, but I'm the one setting the shop up. I'm the one who's going to be working in the shop a lot. So I don't think it's a better option for me to change my workflow as much as to wrap the pipe with hockey tape and then I'm done 5 seconds in and I can move on. But if something seems better to you as a person receiving an Instagram post, right? It might not be better for the person posting it. And there's been so many times that you and I have talked about, like, I posted this way that I like to do this thing. And then somebody has to come in and say, oh, well, why not use a $3,000 tool as opposed to a $200 tool, or whatever,
It's interesting because it's like a lot of those comments will come in. It's like, well, I think this is better. And it's like, I kind of want to say like, well, then you should like post about that. Right? Like you should go on your Instagram and say, hey, listen, like I just watched this video with Ben and Vic and they did this, but I prefer this. Yes. Right? And I mean, it's cool to have different preferences. I mean, like, there's 100 different ways to do anything in this hobby or this profession. And to say that one is better, well, that's quite a statement. Because better for whom? Better for what situation? I mean, their suggestion was to close the clamp. Well, I personally don't like closed clamps.
Yeah.
I like grabbing a clamp that's open so that, especially if you're going to like quickly grab or maybe with one hand, like to me, that makes way more sense. So anything that I have, like let's say, for example, close to my MFT, all of those style of clamps are stored open because a lot of times I'm holding a piece with one hand and I got to get the clamp with the other. If I have to undo the clamp, like it just doesn't work. So in fact, it's not better. It's the opposite of better. So I'm going to go with worse.
And that's your workflow. And my workflow might be totally different. And that's okay.
And that's okay. Like we all do things differently. Like I look at the back, I look behind you, Ben, and I have heart palpitations because I would never be able to have my shop that way. But I know so many people
because it's messy.
Yeah. Like, and whatever. I would never say, Ben, you're an idiot because you work in a messy shop. It's like, no, it's like if that's how you operate and you can, and it's not providing a hurdle for you.
Exactly.
Doesn't matter what I think because it's like, whatever. It's like, I'm just looking at your Inca saw going, yeah.
And there are hurdles behind me. Don't get me wrong. But right now they are not the priority. The priority is whatever's on the bench or just getting out here and whatever,
Absolutely.
And I just think that it's so easy nowadays for everyone to lose sight of your perspective.
Right.
Is not everyone's perspective.
Right.
Your needs are not everyone's needs. Right. Your knowledge base and tool set are not everyone's knowledge base and tool set. And
that's why I always keep an open mind. And I've talked about this many times before, even on this podcast, about the fact that like I went and watched a lecture that Mike Pekovich gave on the block plane. And it's like, do I really need to learn more about the block plane? Maybe not, but Mike did things with the block plane that he did differently than I did. And some of those things I've employed into my workflow, right? And other things he did, it was like, it's not how I would prefer to work. And so that doesn't mean that my way is better or Mike's way is better. It's different. And if I can see an application for it, so I keep my eyes wide open to how everybody does everything, and not just like the big deals in the world, like everybody. I follow Instagrammers that have got like 200 people following them, but they do cool things, and I find that interesting. And so, it's like the whole point of Instagram is to steal other people's cool ideas.
Yeah.
And so I do that. And so I mean, to say this is better, or like I don't even post myself that way as like this is the best way to do XYZ, because there's no, I said Z and not Z. Did you see that?
Oh, wow. You just went so Yankee.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to listen to some ZZ Top just to get that out of my head.
But yeah, how boring would Instagram be if everyone did everything the same way?
Absolutely.
It would just be like, who cares?
Yeah, there's so many different ways to do it, and it's cool to have your way to do it, but please don't be disparaging about others in the way they do it, because if it works for them, then that's the perfect way to do it.
Yeah. And now we're going to get controversial. And this is the stuff that makes people say bad things about me that gets Vic to block them on Instagram.
I got your back, Ben. I'll block everybody.
I know you do, Vic. I know you do, Vic. It's probably Andrea doing it, but whatever. There is, I think you and I texted about this one time. I was like, hey, we need to like have a heart to heart with the audience about, and it's a controversial phrase, mansplaining.
Right.
And I don't want to say it's mansplaining. It's person-splaining, we'll say. Whatever. Let's take pronouns out of it.
Right.
Over-explaining or whatever. There is so many times that I see on other people's posts over-explaining happening and people answering questions that aren't being asked.
Right.
And I got to tell you, to the Instagram community, it makes Instagram less fun for everyone.
Right.
I just don't see the point in it, other than you're just trying to show how smart you are.
Right.
But and I know it's hard, and I know I've done it, and I even somebody posted something, and I messaged them. I was like, hey, by the way, blah blah blah, and I said, oh my goodness, I just mansplained. I'm so sorry. I never do that. And they were totally open to the suggestion I gave them, but it's difficult to not interject, right? But to the Instagram community out there, and this applies to other platforms as well, if there is no question mark in the post, there is no need to answer a question.
There's not an answer being looked for.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, I think that's a really good way to look at it. It's like, unwanted advice, is not, most people don't like receiving it.
Yeah.
And so then, you got to think about, you should just almost like take a second and think about what you're going to say. And like, number one, is it true? Number two, is it going to benefit the overall conversation in any way? And like, what's your ulterior motive? If you just want to like, well, the way I like to do it is blah, 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 blah. And it's like, again, great. Post about it. Like, take a picture, make a reel, do a post about the way you like to do things, and become part of the sharing environment on Instagram, rather than just simply vehemently disagreeing with somebody because they do it differently than you do, or with a different tool, or whatever. And even if I see something, like if I'm following somebody and it shows up in my feed and they're doing something horrendously dangerous with something, right? Table saw is a good example. You see people doing dumb stuff all the time, right? I don't even get involved there. Like, I don't even respectfully send them a message, like a DM, and say, hey, listen, like that last post, like, right?
I don't know. I know I've been guilty of that. It is generally, if it is, if someone starts wearing the content creator hat.
Right. But that's entertainment.
Well, that's entertainment, but there's also an air of authority that comes along with it. If you have a high viewership, blah, 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 blah. Then if you start doing something dangerous, I think it's irresponsible. And
I agree 100%. But at the same time,
is it my place to tell them?
It's not my job.
You're right. You're right, Vic. You're right.
I just don't follow them. It's like, okay, you're doing weird stuff that I'm not really interested in watching you do. And so I can't affect what that person's going to do. Right. I'd like to think that I could, message them and say, hey, listen, that was really dumb. And they'd be like, yeah, you're absolutely right, Vic. I'm not going to do that ever again, because that'll never happen. Right. So I just kind of stay away from it. And in the same way, it's like people sometimes, like I've had comments because I occasionally will wear slides out to the shop. And it's like, oh, nice, steel-toed slides. And I'm like, well, first of all, like, it's what I'm comfortable in working in, not what you're comfortable working in. I've never dropped something on my foot. And knock on wood, I don't. But it's like, a lot of people are just, they're trying to police everything.
Yeah.
Right. And the last thing we need is more policing.
Yeah. It's hard. You're right though. You're right. That is not my, and I know I've done it. I think it's been a long time. I think I've been like, hey man, you're double fencing the table saw there. You might not want to show that in your whatever, but that's not my place. That's
totally, I mean, it's just like,
place.
Because they're doing it there. And if they have any sort of, numbers behind them, they're going to be like, well, where's your numbers? And like, cause that's, that's how you judge how good you are at something, is by how many people follow you. And so I just don't get involved. And I just, like I spend a lot of time teaching people. Mm-hmm. And so, I teach people the safest way that I know of to do things. And I try not to show unsafe things, mostly because I don't do very many unsafe things. I don't even own a table saw. So, it's like, so I can't even get into that mess.
That negates 80% of life's risk right there.
Really.
You're going to
just
live
get rid of the table saw. You
right?
don't have to worry about it. Yeah. Anyway, that's a controversial statement that's going to get some. He uses metric and he doesn't have a table saw. What is this guy even doing on a woodworking podcast?
We don't know. We don't know.
We don't know how it started, and we don't know how to make it stop.
But I don't know. It's like, I feel like the past couple hours, you and I have been texting about this stuff, and it felt natural that we're going to come on and talk about like being a good community steward, whatever.
Right.
Because I know that I find myself not wanting to share things. Just to be like, you know what? I don't want to hear about it. I
just ignore it.
I'm just not going to bother with it. Doesn't matter.
It's easy to get up in arms. The only time I get up in arms is if people are being like downright nasty. Like this guy we're talking about was name calling. Right? And it's like, listen, there's no need for that. There's no need to be a jerk. Yeah. Right. You can respectfully disagree with somebody without resorting to name calling. And so whatever. It's like, I won't tolerate it. It wasn't even aimed at me, but I won't tolerate it on my page. And so that guy's blocked now. And I like to think, well, there you go. Now you're missing out on some pretty awesome content, I like to think. And so
now I will say personally, this is a me thing. I have started blocking people for tool shaming. I absolutely have.
Tool shaming?
For Well, get a shaper origin. It's like for anyone saying just throw, and I think shaper origin is an amazing tool.
Oh,
I totally do. But like, if you think that the answer is that everybody's obtainable answer is to go spend $3,000 on a thing,
on a router,
yeah, that's tool shaming. That is
Right.
you should stop being poor.
Right.
Please do it my way.
You should allocate your discretionary
Yes.
income
Yes.
in this way.
Yes. So I have started blocking people for that because that is a personal thing of mine. And it's not, I'm not doing it from fine woodworking. I'm doing, if somebody goes on,
do your own thing, sure.
on my page and tool shames, I'm just starting to block people. I just don't care anymore.
Yeah.
I have called out plenty of big name for it very
sure.
publicly.
For sure.
Yeah, I'm just not going to put up with it anymore. But enough of that. Enough about Instagram. There's this first question. So it was schedule worked out. So it's just you and me. And I think it's actually for the best because
I like these little chats we have.
Well, just everyone else sucks. I'm sorry.
In layman's terms, really. Yeah.
Yeah. They're just no fun.
Yep.
This first question might very well be a whole episode. So
we have to try to not make it be, because you're right. It could totally be a whole episode.
But I want to answer it, and your perspective is there's all right. Here we go from Mark.
Enough lead up. Enough.
Shut up, Ben.
Let's get right into it.
Shut up, Ben. I almost said what that guy said. All right.
Forget him. Shake it off.
All right. I'm glad to hear that Vic is going to be a permanent part of the show. From Mark, sorry. I'm glad that Vic is going to be a permanent part of the show. I'm also very interested in the fact that he runs a bandsaw-centered shop with no table saw. I also don't have a table saw and don't plan on getting one. I have a track saw with a Festool MFT table and a nice router table. Unfortunately, I don't have a bandsaw yet either. Hard to do a bandsaw-centered shop without a bandsaw, right? You can imagine I really need one since I have no way to rip narrower boards accurately and efficiently. I would also resaw often on this saw. I've been filling the gap with hand tools, but I like to be more efficient as I have a 2-year-old son. Nobody needs to be more efficient than those with 2-year-olds. I totally agree with you, Mark.
Seriously.
I don't anticipate much curve cutting, though. It may come up from time to time. You say that now, Mark.
Yep.
All right. Since I have a small shop where space is very limited, I've been planning to buy a high-end 14-inch saw. And then he lists saws: Laguna 14BX, Rikon 10353, South Bend 1080, blah, blah, blah. So he says, I have 3 major questions. First one, right off the bat, everyone, we cannot answer which saw you should get. We can't. For like
we don't know enough.
Yeah, this isn't just for Mark. Just in general, if you've been wondering why your question has gone unanswered on the podcast and you're saying, which hand plane do I get? Which table saw do I get? And list features. We can't possibly do it. We don't know your work. We don't know your shop. We don't know your finances. We don't know anything that we need to know. So
we're ignorant.
Yes. I will say the saws that he has listed, I don't think there's a bad one in the batch. They would all
I would
be a
agree
great
with
option.
that. Yeah.
All right. So question number 2. I was planning on using my shop vac with a mini cyclone for dust collection since I don't have the space for a standalone collector. Is this a deal breaker for this type of saw? I don't think so.
I have students who run that uses his Festool dust vac plugged into the back of a 14-inch bandsaw, and it works okay. Bandsaws, they're not known for their great dust collection anyway. That and the chop saw, I don't know which is worse, but I think you can. And that being said, there are a lot of compact units nowadays that you can either mount to a wall, or you can a small little 1.5 horsepower canister situation where you could actually replace your your shop vac with something that's got a little bit more guts to it, and then you can just, you know, put in an adapter and use like a regular vacuum hose for the regular sort of jobs that a vacuum will do in the shop. But I think, yeah, I don't think there's any reason why you couldn't. But I remember like further on in his questions, he sort of answered it himself in a sense, because it's like, okay, well, at this power draw, it's going to be like this many horsepower maximum, and the CFM is this. And that's really the problem when you're dust collecting at a machine, is like getting the volume of air, you know, you know, for suction. And that, like, I mean, having like a little small orifice that you would typically have with a shop vac, I mean, that's a little bit of a problem. Like you want a bigger, you know, thing. And so I always find stopping it down is okay, but when you're stopping it up, like when you take a dust vac hose and plug it into a 4-inch adapter and then into a machine, it's never as good, right? So like I would consider selling a shop vac or relegating it to jobs like, you know, cleaning out Cheerios from the back seat of the car, and then go with something a little bit bigger, that still would take up roughly around the same amount of space.
So I agree with everything you said. If you do, yeah, because I'm sorry, I don't think I've ever worked on a bandsaw that had the dust collection I wanted. Even good bandsaw, great dust collector, it's always like there's always cleanup, right?
Yep.
If you are going to use a shop vac, try and get, like, don't use the 4-inch port, like Vic said. Try and get a way of getting that suction right up on the blade, right up on the cut area of the blade. I know that Rob Cosman has a video where he finagles a way of just like cutting a slit with the bandsaw into a piece of PVC pipe and then sticking the dust collector, the shop vac hose on that, and then mount. So you're cutting a kerf into the PVC pipe and mounting it in place around the blade, and then putting the shop vac on that. I have a 3D printed like throat thing that goes up right under my blade, between the bearings actually and the table, and my shop vac hose gets stuck into that, and that does a reasonable job. If there's a way of getting that high velocity, or wait, is it? All right, shop vac is high pressure, low, whatever.
Yeah,
low volume.
Yeah, right.
Low volume, high pressure. If there's a way of getting that right at the source, you stand a better chance.
Right. Right. And I mean, even like if you see like some machines will have a dual port. So they'll have, like, I can say like the Raycon, because I have that saw, it has the big 4-inch pipe that is at the bottom right of the cabinet, where basically all the gullets are getting emptied out and then it's on its way back up. And so that's kind of where the majority of it comes down. But you need to pull a good volume of air out of there in order for that to even work. And so a lot of bandsaws in the past would have a dual port. And so you would have a 4-inch port on the back, and then one that you're talking about, Ben, that mounts like right at the blade. And then you would have to have a Y pipe that basically had a 4-inch and a 2.5 or whatever. And then you would basically split that off, very similar to like the way SawStop does theirs, where they have like a cabinet based one, and then one that goes up to their guard.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's, you're right. The idea, like if you can basically get that small hose, like right where the wood is coming, like where the blade is coming out of the wood and about to go into the bearings, if you can pull it out right there, like that's your best bet. Otherwise, unless you have like super suction, it's going to end up on the floor. It's going to end up coming back up the other side. It's going to end up everywhere.
Well, and I actually have a small, like maybe 1 horsepower dust collector that is hard piped into my bandsaw now. And, I turn the bandsaw on and the little dust collector comes on. And I do have that split. So it's going in the 4-inch port on the back, and then it's going into a splitter, or it's splitting, going up to the throat plate, then the 4-inch port on the back. And I've actually slowly been like taping off some of that 4-inch port to try and get more suction to the throat plate.
Right.
And one of these days I want to test what's better, shop vac with a high velocity shop vac straight to the throat plate, or a small dust collector split off. I almost think it might be shop vac. I don't know.
I would tend to agree. And I think that would be a fantastic little video.
Yeah, I got nothing better to do.
Yeah.
You're right, though. You're right. It's just, how do you test it? That's the hard thing. The moment
it's subjective. Yeah. It's like, how much dust is there? Like, you know, take a picture of the base of the machine, like before and after, and sort of try to judge it that way.
But then I'd have to clean my shop, Vic.
Oh, well, and then, so we won't see that video for a year now.
All right. So part number 3 of Mark's question. Let's see. I'm confused by this one, but how much standing space should I have on the in-feed side of the saw? Obviously, I need enough room to open the doors and change the blade. Can I get away with just enough room for maintenance and stand in front of the machine when I'm using it? I'd like the back of the saw. I'd like to back the saw up to a wall and have a row of cabinets on either side of it. I've never seen anyone with an outfeed table on a bandsaw like a table saw typically has, but it seems like it would work well. So I think I need 4 feet on all side of my bandsaw. I think it takes up more space than you might think.
When he says back the saw up to the wall, I think he's talking about the spine of the saw, which I call the spine. So basically the left-hand side of the saw.
Okay.
Right? Like that can be right up against a wall. And
no problem there. Yep.
You don't infringe on any of your in-feed, out-feed, or width. And so, I don't know. I tend to like kind of spread out when I'm at the bandsaw. Like I kind of like take a wider stance with my legs, and I'm like kind of looking down, and I'm like, so I like having a lot of room. And then when I'm doing the back end of the cut, I don't like using a push stick. What I do is I come around the other side of the saw and then pull the work through up against the fence, because I just feel like I have more control in doing that. And, it feels better for me. I hate push sticks. I've never have good control with anything with a push stick. And I know that there's all kinds of, wonderful push sticks out there available, and homemade ones and all that other stuff. But for myself, I find that I don't enjoy using them. So for me, I like having room all the way around. So I think 4 feet makes good sense. And as far as outfeed goes, like if I'm working on a long piece, I just use one of those roller stands.
Mm-hmm.
I have one of those folded up against the wall, and if I need it for anything, like something at my chop saw or something at, like at the other at the bandsaw or whatever, I find that works really well.
I'm gonna be honest with you. I have a roller stand. I've never used it once.
Well, that's fair. I use it rarely.
I never think to do it. But again, I'm not cutting real long stuff these days.
Right.
But I think that if I were to do the roller stand thing, and the reason why I haven't thrown it out yet or given it away is that I always think I'm going to do the Michael Fortune thing where he mounted it on the back of the saw so that it just like opens up and hangs off the saw and doesn't take up any more floor space. It's just hanging around waiting for that to never happen.
That's fair.
But you had said something about wide stance, and I actually went over to my bandsaw earlier and thought about how much, what area needs to be clear here. And the stance, that good stance you make when you're hand cutting dovetails?
Mm-hmm.
It's not that different of a stance at the bandsaw.
It's true.
Because the more stable you are, the more you're able to control the cut. right?
It's not like a drill press where you could safely stand legs shoulder width apart and just, kind of do your work. You need to be a little bit more, in your samurai stance.
Yeah, and depending on the height of the table, of the bandsaw table, some of them are lower than others. So
like the old Lagunas, the old Italian ones, that like the table was super low. So you had to like really get,
and
ready.
then you really are widening your stance to get down and stable. So don't,
because I like to get down at my
and
bandsaw.
Stable. That's our next hit song. Go. We'll see if I have time for a remix. All right. So, yeah, I think you need all three sides. I want 4 feet on the in feed, 4 feet on the out feed, and 2 feet clear on the open side to walk around to the back, like you said, Vic.
Yeah. Yeah. You need that. Like for me, that's what I like. I like as soon as if there's something in my way at the bandsaw, like even if it's something just on the floor, I have to move it because it's like, I don't want to take my eyes off what I'm doing even for a second. Like I like to make sure I know what's going on.
Yeah, I used to have my disc sander Jenga'd right up under the table of my bandsaw, and because it fit really well there, and it was great when I was using the disc sander. But as soon as I had to walk around to the bandsaw, to the back of the bandsaw, there was one thing for me to trip on there, and I wound up moving it. It just didn't work there anymore.
I agree. Yeah.
All right, now. More from Mark. I'd like to hear more about the realities of working in a shop without a table saw. And he says, I think this could even be a whole episode. You're right, Mark. What tasks are more difficult? Cross-cutting small pieces without a sled? Can you use a cross-cut sled on a bandsaw? Do you cut dados across long boards with a miter gauge on the router table or a handheld router? When do you use a slot cutter bit instead of a straight bit? I mean, he's all over the place. This is great.
Yeah.
What other types of router bits, tools, techniques will I need? What do you think about the overall safety of a shop without a table saw? Are there operations that you think would be safer with the table saw? So
again, safer is like, it's a personal thing, right? Like some people are very comfortable with table saws and operations at them. Other people are not. And so there's a perception of safety or non-safety or whatever. So first of all, the one thing that I used to use a table saw for all the time was cutting shoulders for mortise and tenon joints, right? For the tenon, or cutting grooves, or cutting rabbets, or cutting dados. Those were the big things that I would use at the table saw. I never used to use and again, this is not disparaging for those of you who do, but I've never liked using the type of jig that holds a piece of wood vertically in the air to cut the cheeks of the tenon, right? Yeah. Just not been something that I was ever comfortable with. And so, so basically everything I was doing were those main things. I have a track saw, and I also have a router that interfaces with that track. And so I did it just the other day. I was working on a new workstation, and I needed a whole bunch of basically half lap joints. And I basically stacked all the legs together, clamped them together, put the track down, and then I ran the router through and cut all of those all at once. And it was nice. They all lined up. They were all the same size. They were all good to go. And I could tweak them by, 0.1 of a millimeter if I needed to. And so that worked out well. Where things can fall down is if you're into smaller pieces. And so again, we get into, but is it safer on the table saw? So if you're making a tiny little box with like a 6-inch piece of wood, and you're like putting it up against the stop on a sled, and then like you're cutting like a little groove or something, it's like, I don't feel the best about doing that at the table saw. And so I'll use the router table instead, or in a lot of cases for really small pieces, I just go to a hand operation where I'll saw it close by hand, and then I'll put it on a shooting board and shoot it. And I think a lot of woodworkers who work with small components think like Kumiko and all that other stuff. I mean, really, you're using hand tools, because to try to work with the smaller pieces on a machine can be a little bit, you know? So, and again, like there are some people are going to be like, oh, sissy. And it's like, well, whatever. You know, so I think I haven't really run into a problem. Sometimes smaller pieces of sheet material, plywood and stuff can be a little bit weird with a track saw. And so I just cut it on the bandsaw. And the little bandsaw on edge, I just plane it off, and people like freak out because it's like, but your plane blade's going to get dull. And it's like, yeah, and I can sharpen it, so it's not a big deal. Same thing with on the jointer. Like I'll joint the edge of a piece of plywood, no problem. And you know, if the plane needs, if the machine needs, like I have an indexable head, like indexable cutters, and so I'll spin them, and then, you know, no big deal. So, yeah, it always made more sense to me to bring the tool to the work versus the work to the tool, especially when you're talking about some big pieces and things like that. It's really nice just slapping a track down and cutting. So, yeah, I don't know. I've not missed the table saw at all. And again, like until I had this last one that my friend gave me, I hadn't owned a table saw in 10 years. And so like I've been fine without it. So
I always think that if you're going to do it like an MFT style table, and for those who don't know, an MFT is Festool's table, but it's a grid of 20 millimeter holes that are precision bored into a top so that you can have a vast array of stops and fences and all sorts of things that attach to it. So if you are looking, if a table sawless shop sounds good to you and you're not like a hand tool guru, you know, an MFT is something to look into, or there are other options. You just recently, you're making one?
Yeah. Yeah, so there's lots of ways to make your own MFTs. There's a fella in England named Peter Parfit who has a line of tools called Parf Accessories, which is a fantastic name. And it's the folks at Axminster Tools. They have produced it under their UJK line, and basically it allows you to, it has jigs that you can use in conjunction with a router, or a drill or a hand drill, to be able to drill out one of these tops to a very high precision. And there's all kinds of hacks available. Like if you don't want to go out and spend the money on a Festool MFT, and listen, I wouldn't blame you if you didn't. There's all kinds of folks that are really putting a lot of good content out on how to make like discounted versions of it that work every bit as well, and in some cases better than the OEM stuff. And so there's tons of options out there. So it's not like, you know, it's like, oh, I'd love to do that, but I don't have, you know, the money for an MFT and this, that, and the other thing. There's one fella, oh dear, his name just escaped me. Anyway, he basically went onto Amazon. He's a Brit. He went onto Amazon and he ordered this, you know, POS track saw and track that was kind of like bargain basement, you know, and he made what he called his garden version of an MFT, and I mean the thing works amazing.
Yeah,
and it's just the way it is. It like there's the system works well, and you don't have to spend a ton of money on it.
I think you'll find most of the really cool versions are European because they're less table saw happy, you know, and they don't have dado stacks and a lot of different reasons for them to. I think that they adopted track saws earlier than we did around here. Another great thing that I stole the idea from Holzwerken. Do you know what the German magazine, German woodworking magazine? and their YouTube channel years ago, and I did like a fine woodworking version of the video, but it was, and I credited them, of course, but it was a crosscut table that it was a piece of plywood. I think I made mine about 30 inches deep, and with a fence on the back, and then just a couple of stops that came up that were perpendicular to that fence. And you could put the piece of plywood or whatever you were cross-cutting right in that sled, butt your fence for the track saw right up to it, and have repeatable 100% accurate crosscuts off of this. You could put a fence or a stop block on the fence if you wanted repeatability, but it was that kind of MFT thing without the 90-degree, without the 20 millimeter dog holes and all that stuff. Right. So if you have a track saw and you're just getting started and wondering if this is a route and you want to dip your toes in the whole MFT world, I'll post a link to the Holzwerken video, because his is smarter than mine. Mine is, I did it on purpose. It's the really dumbed down version. But it's just strictly for cross cutting. But so I'll post the Holzwerken, if I'm saying that correctly, video and our video, and we'll try and find that garden MFT.
Yeah, I'll get you the name, because I just I'm close to 50 and nouns just fly out of my head. So, but yeah, no, I think it's a great way to work. And I mean, even like cutting things like dados and stuff, like you can, with a chop saw, or with a rail saw, you can like really prescribe how deep it's going. And so you can do a couple of test cuts just like you would do at a table saw. And you can get it a very precise thing. And then I actually watched this guy whose name I can't remember, and it's going to drive me crazy. He basically will take a board and he's going to cut a rabbet. He'll cut the rabbet, like the first part, and then he'll stand the board up on edge on the side of the MFT, put the track down on it, and cut the other part of the rabbet, all using the saw instead of using the router.
Oh.
Yeah, so it's like, it's amazing.
Peter Millard.
Peter Millard, thank you.
I Googled garden MFT.
Yep.
And the first thing that comes up is MFT, Naughty Tea Garden. Don't know what that is. Click on that at your own discretion.
That's right. Zip right by that one.
When I did garden MFT table, Peter Millard. Yeah. Yeah.
He's great. And he'll show you expensive ways to do it. Right, with expensive kit that is all pre-made, and like, you can buy it, and if you've got the money to do it, great. But this one that he makes, he uses like 20 millimeter PVC as the dogs, and like it looks really sketchy. But when you watch the work that he does, he's got a whole series of projects that show you how you can work just as accurately with this, not so great system. And it works really, really well. So I guess what I'm saying is that there's not really an excuse to say, well, the MFT is expensive. Absolutely it is. But you can work around that, and you can work anywhere from like the very bottom, like what Peter Millard is showing you, all the way up to like full MFT or other OEM parts that you can get in various parts of the world.
So, all right. So if you were going to do a project, I think you just got to pick your battles, because if you were working in Vic, you want to do a project with a bunch of box joints.
Yeah.
What are you going to
do? Switch them to dovetails.
Exactly. See, this is what I was thinking. I knew you were going to say that, but it's just, it's like, okay, fine. I'm working in a table sawless shop.
Well, but you can cut box joints with a router.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, I think Rockler even makes a little kit that you use to like, that it goes in, you put a miter slot in your router table, and it's got the pin, and then you just, you put a backer board, because of course it gets a little hairy there at the back end, right?
I always think it would just be takes such a long time to do finger joints on a router table, but you're right. It's doable.
absolutely. Because your fingers are pretty small, right? They're like, what, 6 mil or sorry, quarter inch at the most?
Yeah, sure, whatever. Yeah.
So like you can blust through that with a sharp bit. That's the key, sharp.
All right. Yeah. I haven't experienced that in a while, but yeah. Okay. So I just can't come up with any operations that aren't doable with an MFT style table. And I think kind of key is the router mounted or the track routed mounter. Track routed mounter.
Wow. Yes.
Track mounted router.
Yeah.
Like that would be really helpful for dados and things like that.
Oh, absolutely. And the one thing I will give the table saw credit for, which I always give the table saw credit for, is
cutting a lot of fingers off. No, I'm sorry.
Yeah, the it does volume well. So if you have if you're making a set of 8 chairs and you got to run a groove in 4x8 aprons or whatever, and you set up your dado stack and you get it like perfect and you get everything, and then you just zing, 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 zing. That's fantastic. That's where the table saw, in my mind, if I was a production woodworker, I would own a table saw because it's worth the setup, right?
Let's change that question though. If you were a professional woodworker, because you are a professional woodworker, but you make your living teaching and doing a whole bunch of elements, right? But if you were a professional furniture maker, do you think you could do it without a table saw?
It would depend on whether or not I did production work or bespoke, one of.
Okay.
And personally, I wouldn't do production work because like I have a level of ADHD that just wouldn't allow it.
Yeah.
And so for me, everything is a new thing. And so I would be doing unique setups all the time anyway. Yeah. So for me, again, it still doesn't make sense.
But for a hobbyist, there's no reason to, if that's how you want to go, if that floats your boat.
Absolutely. If you like the table saw and you got the room for it and you're willing to like dedicate that huge, I don't know how many square feet it takes. I'm sure someone's got a calculation, but 8 feet behind, 8 feet in front, off to the side, and the whole 9 yards. I mean, that's a huge piece of real estate. And I mean, I can remember looking behind you, Ben, and seeing your big table saw there, and it basically took up the whole entirety of the center of your shop. And I mean, that's a lot of real estate to give up, especially if you're working in a smaller shop, like I think a lot of us are. Mm-hmm. And so, it doesn't do enough work in order to justify the amount of space that it takes up, in my mind.
Yeah, I agree. Well, I agree for me.
Right.
Because the work I'm doing, I got the little one back there and I use it for bits and bobs, and that's what I need. But if I were doing all sorts of, who knows, Did you see the new Festool table saw that's coming out? No.
They are coming out with a little thing called a trim saw. This thing, when you turn the handle like to raise the blade, it goes up in 0.1 millimeter increments. And you can dial this thing up and down. And I don't know much about it. I saw one video on the internet.
Festool UK.
Yeah.
We're not getting it. We're not going to get it.
We probably won't. But that is judging by like the little saw that you have or the little Festool that's designed for doing like very precision cross-cut work, that's the only one I would consider. And the UK price on it is $3,000.
Does it have flush sensing?
I don't know, but my guess is yes, considering they bought saw stop, right?
All right.
So I don't know. Anyway, check it out. I can just imagine everybody on their computers looking up
I'll post that video too. Yep.
Yeah. But anyway, so yeah, it's that's the only one I would consider. And I really used to love my little Inca one because it did all those little things, and I also had the little mortiser with it.
Yeah, so do I.
Yeah. So I mean, like, it's really it's a cool machine, but I've always been frustrated by the fact that every time you get into a smaller version of a machine, they usually get crappier.
Yeah.
Right? Like when you go from a 14-inch bandsaw to a 10-inch bandsaw, now it's like Fisher Price did and actually I would think Fisher Price would be better quality because they usually are, but
you can make it work.
Right.
And there are people out there doing Tamar 3x3 customs doing
Yeah, with her DeWalt one.
Yeah, she finally got a saw stop.
Oh, she did. Okay.
It kind of broke my heart. Because
yeah, it's like this junk saw that she's doing really good work on.
Yeah, and it's just proof that it's the maker, not the tool, But coming back to Mark's question, it's totally doable. And you and I have talked about doing a video series of making a piece without table saw, So we need to come back around to that one at some point. All right. So this next question is from Zachary. And this one's perfect for asking Vic because I have asked these questions of Vic myself. I was in a National Woodworking store recently and noticed a large tool company, Jet, was offering a 10-inch planer jointer combo machine for around $900. I already have a planer, DeWalt, but the price for the combo machine has me tempted. Checking prices, the same company's 8-inch dedicated joiner comes in at more than twice the cost. I'm curious about your thoughts as to using this as a dedicated jointer. I feel like it might be a good value, but I'm not sure what I'm missing. I do want to get a joiner, but I'm not in any rush. What limitations would the combo machine have that a dedicated joiner would not? So, Vic, you have a small, 10-inch?
Yep, 10-inch. Yep, 10-inch Rikon, yep.
So that unfortunately they don't make anymore.
Right, which I don't understand why, because it's a great little machine. The difference in the two machines is that, like, when you get like an 8-inch joiner, or I don't know what size they come in anymore, 8-inch, 10-inch, whatever, it's going to be a sturdy machine. It's going to be cast iron tables, and it's going to be pretty robust. From what I can tell, the majority of the 10-inch combo machines are running aluminum tables. And now that's not bad or good, right? Like, my tables are nice and flat. I get nice flat results when I use them. So I'm not really complaining about it. And the fence system is also aluminum. And so if a little bit of flex is going to upset you, then you're probably not going to like it. But again, when you consider that if you put pressure up against the fence as, moderate pressure, you don't have to kill it, and push things through when you're referencing the fence side, it's going to be fine. I'm not sure about other machines. I know that the Rikon has the Euro style guard versus the pork chop guard, which I prefer personally. I prefer the Euro style one because the blade is always covered, right? Regardless of where you are in the cut. And then I still have a DeWalt, the Precious 735 that does 13 inches. It's sitting in the basement right now because when I got this 10-inch machine, I said, well, I'm just going to use it for both functions, for jointing and planing. Because I thought, well, how many times do I actually plane more than 10 inches? Right? It's not very often for me.
Yeah.
And if I'm doing like sort of some leveling on a piece or whatever, I've got an open-ended drum sander that I can use for doing the kind of final passes on a glue up or something. And I have a friend who has a 24-inch thickness planer, so I don't worry about it too much. But I mean, I found that 10-inch machine is, I've never maxed it out yet. They seem to have a reasonable amount of power to them. I've not bogged it down. Well, no, that's not completely true. I did accidentally one time put something through there that was tapered and didn't know it was tapered, and it went from cutting like a 32nd of an inch to a quarter of an inch, and it didn't like that.
So I will. Can I interject though that I think that the Rikon that you have might be a little bit beefier of a machine than the $900 Jet.
Well, $900 is pretty inexpensive, right?
Yeah.
Like the machine I have, I think was like $2,500 or $3,000 or something along that line.
Yeah, 2,000 at least, I think, when I was looking. Yeah.
But I think the root of his question was can I get away with
2,000
using it just as a jointer, right? And then continue to use the DeWalt as my dedicated thickness planer. And again, I think you just have to be careful at that $900 price point. It may be a little bit, the tables may be a little thinner than what you'd like to see them at. There might be a little bit, the fence might be a little rickety, and that might bother you. So I think, if you're going to only use the machine as a jointer anyway, maybe it makes sense to kind of save up a bit more and wait to get the dedicated jointer. But I had a 12-inch Inca, as Ben knows, because he was heartbroken when I sold it. And it was a combination machine, but I only used it as a jointer because at that time I also still had the 735. And so I had one set up for that and the other one set up for the other. So the advantage with having individual machines is you don't have to worry about converting the machine.
Yeah.
The 10-inch machines generally require you to remove the outfeed table and then rotate the dust hood over and then lift the table up in order to, get where you're at. When you go up to the 12-inch versions of those machines, whether it's Rikon or Grizzly or like even like the Hammer A3, the whole infeed and outfeed lifts up, and then you can put things through underneath. So it's a little bit more convenient when you have the bigger machine because it's kind of less operation. But I've timed myself, not to try to break any sort of land speed records because that's not how I'm built. But this was less than a minute for me to convert that machine over from jointing to planing and vice versa.
Yeah.
So I don't buy time as a issue. If it seems like a nuisance to you, then it's going to bother you having to do the switch.
Yeah. All right. So I can't give my 2 cents on this without answering another question that came in that's related.
Yeah.
And this one is from Jesse. What do you think about the 8-inch benchtop joiners like the Grizzly, Jeep? And this is funny because we said early on that we can't answer should I get this machine or not, right? But
right.
I think we're talking about a class of machine now. That's right. So a lot of these are interchangeable, but new 8-inch benchtop joiners like the Grizzly G0834 or the comparable Rikon models. In the past, people have said 6-inch joiner isn't worth buying because you outgrow it quickly. Don't necessarily agree with that, by the way. The price of the benchtop models makes them very attractive, but I wonder if a smaller motor, lighter weight, shorter tables, etc., make it not worth it. So I happen to have a 8-inch Cut Tech jointer that I bought used for $300, I think. And I remember I first saw your friend Rachel with a Rikon version and asked her like, hey, what do you think of that? And then I know that you were over there and I asked you like, and you said, yeah, it's a decent machine,
Yeah.
Now if I were anyone, but if I were answering Zachary's question, I think if I was going to be buying a machine as a dedicated joiner, I would buy a dedicated joiner for half the price.
Yeah.
And this one has carbide cutters. Now, granted, it doesn't have a whole lot of carbide cutters, but if you go nice and it does the job. If you go nice and slow, you're getting the same amount of cutters per inch. And it's fine. Now, everything you brought up about that combo machine, applies here as well. Aluminum tables. I made sure that they were flat before, I don't think I would buy a used one sight unseen. I would buy a new one that I could send back if the tables were not flat. Right? You cannot expect the fence to be a rigid cast iron beast, right? And one thing that I immediately found was that my aluminum fence is, for lack of a better word, corrugated.
Yeah.
It's not a single plane.
Most of them are, yeah.
Yeah, and it's really annoying, and it's very difficult to check for square on them.
Yeah, because you see light all the way up.
Yeah, it's just you don't have one face that you're eyeing down. So what I did was I took a cutting board and cut it up and screwed it to the fence and then flattened it on the joiner. And now that is the face of my fence. And I have one plane for the fence. Now, also keep in mind, Zachary and other guy, Jesse, that I'm mostly doing instruments these days. I'm doing small work. And also keep in mind that I have, anytime I want, a 12-inch Grizzly down the road from me. So if I need to do larger stuff, it's without question, I just go down the road and do it at the fine woodworking shop. But I think that if the day ever comes when I don't have access to that 12-inch Grizzly, this joiner is going to do fine by me. I think,
as far as the length of it goes, like, how long's a joiner plane?
Yeah.
It's 24 inches.
And you might need to be a little bit more mindful of what you're doing. Making sure that you're really putting the pressure where it needs to be, because you don't have the excess in feed and out feed to kind of lean on.
Or you just slap your track down on that really bowed piece and straighten it out. Or snap a chalk line and take it to your bandsaw and straighten it out first.
There's so many ways. But
so many ways to do it.
For me, I sold my Powermatic PM60 that took up a chunk of my shop.
Oh, for sure.
And bought this for a third of what I got. And it takes up way less space. The flow of my shop is happier. And I'm happier because of it. And it does exactly what I needed to do. Cannot say that it'll work for everyone, but I think they are a viable option.
But yeah, so I think those small machines are great. When I was at Rachel's, Moody Makes, by the way, on Instagram, I was really impressed with the quality of the cut, because as the first thing I looked at, as you pointed out, Ben, is there's a lot less cutters.
Yeah.
And so I thought, how is this going to go? And we used it. I tried it out and I was like, oh my goodness, this thing works surprisingly well. And you got to remember, like with the jointer, you're not looking to put finish on the board after it's gone over the jointer, right? You're still going to, at the very least, sand it or do some hand planing operations and then, maybe do a final sand or whatever. So I'd say it's 100% better than the old two-bladed little machines that they used to sell, right? So, that's a good point, Ben. If you're going to buy a machine, buy one of those little 8-inch ones. It's going to do 99% of the work that you do, unless you're making, 4-poster beds or whatever, and most of us aren't. You don't need that. You don't need the big honking out and in feed and everything else.
And I think CutTech even makes, and we haven't had it into test or anything, so cannot speak on specifics, but they used to, it's not here anymore. They used to make a 10-inch.
Oh,
version.
Yes. Some of them, yeah, because I've seen 10-inch ones before too.
10-inch benchtop jointer. Wahuda makes a 10-inch benchtop joiner. Kind of looks like the same thing, but
yeah, It's
So
orange day at the shop.
that new is $700. I don't know, but it's worth looking at. Again, I was more than happy to jump on this cut tech because I was able to see it and test it. I brought wood. I brought like a piece of figured maple there and ran it over, and I was happy with the results. But I would really have a hard time. I think if you can only afford a 6-inch joiner and you need a 6-inch and you need a joiner, go for it. B, nowadays though, I would have a hard time not looking at these 8-inch benchtop models.
Yeah.
It's a good category. I really think so. So
I do too. Yeah.
And one of these days, another video I'd like to do one day is the modifications and the ways that I've finagled making this one lift a little bit more than its weight, we'll say. But
cool.
Yeah. Cool. Well, Vic, you got anything else? Any random recommendations? I have one.
Okay.
Get fish glue. Get a bottle of fish glue. It's kind of weird, and it's fun to have weird stuff in your shop.
Yeah.
But I have found that I use fish glue every now and then, and I'm glad I have it.
I find I typically fillet the fish rather than glue it.
You know what? I spend most of my time, I'm not big on fish, so I'd rather put them back together, get them back into circulation.
I see. That's fair.
Yeah.
Fish glue,
But
huh?
anytime you're gluing metal to wood, fish glue is a good option. So even if you just have handles that fall off your chisels, little fish glue in there, boom, reversible too.
And I was just going to say, it's like any protein glue, it's reversible.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah.
I have a music recommendation.
Bring it.
The band is called ! And
Can you even Google that?
well, you can. And whatever streaming service you use for your music, they'll have it.
All right.
They've been around for a long time. And they're kind of funky, and I like having them on in the shop or in my ears because I use I have the music in my ear defenders. They're kind of fun music to bop around in the shop too. So
Groovy.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Vic.
all right, always great hanging out, Ben.
Yeah, you too, man. Well, that does it for this episode of Shop Talk Live. Thank you so much for letting us into your shops and on your dog walks and your commutes and however you're listening to this podcast, whatever you're doing while you're listening to this podcast. We appreciate you letting us join along. If you have any questions you'd like answered on the show, send them into shoptalk@taunton.com. If you're watching on YouTube, please click that thumbs up button, and we'll be back in 2 weeks with another episode. Thank you for listening. You know the stance, that good stance you make when you're hand cutting dovetails?
Mm-hmm.
It's not that different of a stance at the bandsaw.
It's true.
Because the more stable you are, the more you're able to control the cut.
It's not like a drill press where you could safely stand legs shoulder width apart and just, kind of do your work. You need to be a little bit more, in your samurai stance.
Oh, depending on the height of the table, some of them are lower than others.
Oh yeah, like the old Lagunas, the old Italian ones, that like the table was super low, so you had to like really get, ready.
And then you really are widening your stance to get down and stable. Get down and stable.
Because I like to get down.
Get down and stable. Get down and stable.
Because I like to get down.
Get down and stable. Get down and stable.
Because I like to get down at my bandsaw.
And stable. That's our next hit song. You got to get down